We're going to look at stress and freedom from stress. And to understand this well, I want to define the human neurological landscape of fear and concern and why this is so important. If you don't understand this landscape, I promise you will be manipulated. You will be manipulated by those individuals who want power, who want money, or want to control you. So understanding this frees you to be and to do what you want to do. Now, this is like the 13-step program to neural liberation and freedom from manipulation by bad actors and the attention economy. It is worth remembering your brain is in a bone box. It's in a bone box up here, and it is predictive. It's predictive, sense-making, biological, meaning-making piece of kit. 1,000 trillion synapses rooted in ancient neurological architecture. And all of this is based on biological survival and the algorithms of survival, some of which are over 500 million years old. They are powerful. Others are 350 million years old, and still others 200 million years old. And these algorithms drive how and who we are. And they will run your system when they're triggered. They will do. That's inevitable. Now, evolution has worked so well to get to the point of having mammals. It works. Now, the most recent part of your brain is the human prefrontal cortex. And this is critical for managing emotions, emotional triggers as well, and also for creating emotional literacy. It's so important for goal setting and achieving the goals. And it's important for decision making and social behavior and empathy. It's also critical for delayed gratification, putting off things to achieve those goals. And it's critical for navigating complex social hierarchies. This beautiful bit of the brain is also important for inhibition and self-control and engaging in abstract reasoning. It has so many functions. The most recent part of our brain is there for moral reasoning, working memory, executive function. It's amazing. And it only matures fully around the age of 24 to 27 years old. This part of the brain is only 200,000 years old, and it switches off after even a relatively small amount of the stress hormones, adrenaline and epinephrine, it's called in America, or cortisol as well. So epinephrine, adrenaline, cortisol, and this part switches off. And the older body-based algorithms that are 500 to 350 million years old, they then run the show. Now, all of this depends on baseline stress levels and how your brain is set up to perceive threat. And that is based on your childhood, based on your conditioning. And it's based on your brain training. And that's what this video is about, to help you understand how to train your brain, the brain in a box. What disciplines have you engaged in to train your brain? Well, is it even possible? The answer is yes, a big, resounding yes. Now, we know from the evidence base, and there is a substantial evidence base, that 4 kinds of mind training work really well. First of all, I'm going to name them. One is focused attention. The second is what's called open monitoring. The third is moving between these first 2. The fourth is compassion and loving kindness meditation, cultivating positive effect, if you like. Now, there are studies by, for example, Lutz et al. In 2008, and they looked at enhanced and increased prefrontal cortical activity. Lazar and company, 2005, looked at increased cortical thickness from these practices. Now, another group, Holksel and company, in 2005, found that from these practices, the amygdalic activation, that's your brain's watchdog for fear, was reduced. Another group, Tang et al. From 2015, found increased functional connectivity between the prefrontal cortex and the emotional or limbic regions of the brain. It goes on. I mean, Lutz et al. Again, 2004, and Shear et al. 2010. They found gamma synchrony, which is the way the brain works in a continuous focus process. And this continues beyond the meditation practice. So yes, you can own your brain, you can train it, and you can not be triggered by life situations into distress, the emotional reactivity and the kind-mindedness, which is how we make other people into objects, and the projection that goes with this. And we know that meaning making is largely defined by the language you learned as a child. What on earth do I mean by that? How does that work? If you think about English, first of all, the tongue is always at the front of the mouth. We don't use guttural tones or tones at all. And it's purely subject-object first language, which works on the basis of nouns to divide solid chunks of stuff. So what do I mean by this? Subject-object is I, me, mine, and it. There's subject as us, and then there's object as the stuff. And the object can be our thoughts, our emotions, our body, and it can also be other stuff and other people. We objectify things and turn them into solid chunks. Now, in reality, of course, there are no solid chunks. Everything is process. If you look at a tree isn't a chunk of lumber. It's a living process of water coming up out of the ground, flowing through the trunk and out through the leaves. It's minerals, it's sunlight coming into it, creating sugars and carbohydrates and all the stuff that makes up the tree from carbon dioxide and water. It's a whole process, and it's interrelated to all the other trees through the mycelial webs. So a tree is really forest. So just calling things nouns and creating that reality is an interesting way to see things. Now, the other thing about the English language is it has no systemic metaverbs to explain the joined upness, like I just said about trees. And the English language also no longer has any overarching integral metaverbs to describe the unified cosmos, except the kind of demiurge, the patriarchal big man in the sky god that's been conjured up by the Roman Empire primarily. Not only that, English reasons in polarities, opposites such as good and bad, where good cannot ever be bad and bad cannot ever be good. Up can never be down. Now, the thing is that advanced vision logic views phenomena, events, situations, occurrences as relatively good or bad, both good and bad, because there are elements of that within each other, and also neither good or bad because those are judgments made by the mind. And yet thinking in such nuances is rare, extremely rare, in the supposedly educated modern world. Now, interestingly, if we look at Chinese language, for example, Weiji, which means crisis and opportunity, or Quanjai, which means width and narrowness, they're yin-yang views where both are contained within a word. These yin-yang views where both polarities are contained within a word as possibilities. Looking at languages like the Sioux Nation language, the vision of nouns as trees are much more like treeing, they're verbs, not just tree. So you see, the way you see the world is defined by the way your culture taught you to see. That's what's critical here, which means there are other ways of seeing. And the way you're taught to see and communicate is the way you do what you do in the world and the way you define your stress. So what is the modern neural landscape? What is the social soup in which the human brain emerges, grows, and lives? First of all, stress statistics from health organizations, major national health organizations, suggest that about 75% of the population experience stress as overwhelm on a regular basis. If we look at stress statistics, above 75% of the population, and this is from national health agencies, experience overwhelm on a regular basis. If we look at executive burnout, the average tenure for chief executive officers, looking around to 2025, is down from nearly 8 years to just 6.3 years. And many of those individuals are even finished within 5 years. That's the lowest level since 2013. I want to also introduce the concept of compassion, because compassion is important, and there's a trend at the moment to dismiss empathy as non-existent. Empathy is biologically real. We see different parts of the brain light up in the experience of empathy. So dismissing it is naive, to say the least. And it's interesting looking at the relationship neurobiologically between sympathy, empathy, and compassion. And compassion is kind of advanced empathy, where you'd want to do something about changing the situation for the betterment of other people as well. So compassion is centric. You look after yourself. It's rooted in self-care. It's rooted in community care, but then extends outwards into a broad range of concern and action for change for all beings. As Buddhists say, all beings everywhere, without exception. So compassion is vast. And we know that when people train in empathy practices, like loving kindness or compassion, number one, they feel better about life, a lot better about life. They feel better about themselves. And actually their brain networks experience less stress and are more decision-focused, clear decision-focused. So compassion is really interesting, and there's an increasing level of research looking at just how compassion works for us. And what we see in the world as well with stress is compassion fatigue, which is where many people in caring professions get exhausted with that because they don't have practices to look after themselves. This is very common amongst professional carers, such as nurses, for example, where just over around 52%, yeah, and emergency teams at 62 to 70%, right, experience this kind of compassion fatigue where they're exhausted with looking after others. Now, curiously, Botox and fillers reduce compassion and empathy. They do because we can no longer use the parts of the brain that mirror somebody else's expression because our face is stuck in a particular shape. That's interesting, isn't it? Now, there's also the modern politically driven rewriting of empathy, as if it was some kind of liberal conspiracy. No, it's actually biologically innate, and it's important for human beings because it's how we emerged to survive in the climate changes out of which Homo sapiens emerged. And it's neurologically key to being a well-developed human being and a human being who can deal with stress. Empathy and compassion are also important for being a human being who's not operating from a place of unresolved childhood trauma and then projecting it onto the world. Now, for those individuals who are unfortunately fleeing war and persecution in other countries, and this happens, it's happened many times, it'll continue to happen, modern Western countries are losing compassion. Now, despite many refugees having been through horrific, and I mean horrific traumatic events, not all of them, but many of them, and at the same time it appears to be okay for white refugees, such as from Ukraine, to be in Western countries, but not brown ones. These are trends where we're kind-mindedness, where we make other people into the kind of people that, and our brain does that. That creates stress as well. And, different viewpoints are manipulated when we're stressed by the emotional triggers of the attention economy. Attention-grabbing social media narratives trigger people into fear. Now, these attention-grabbing social media narratives are often driven by power-hungry agendas, people who want to be in a position of dominance over others. And just remember, when we're talking about kind-mindedness, that's pushed by thinking of people as vermin. They eat cats and dogs. They do this bad thing. They're the people that, right? That is specifically focusing onto your neurobiology to make you believe, behave, and respond in certain ways. That's what it's for, and it's still working. So when we understand how we work, we can liberate ourselves from this kind of neurological complexity, this stress-based disaster in which humanity is stepping into. This is the neural politics of manipulated brains. And of course, this kind of objectification is always where war, slavery, and genocide is justified. It's justified because they are different. They are different in the them and us narratives triggered in your brain. And those narratives are triggered. Question then is, how do you reclaim your own kind-mindedness and stop being triggered by power-hungry agendas? How do you do that? Well, we're going to have a look at that. But before we go there, just think about fear porn. Now, fear porn is where violence and war is emphasized, conflict is emphasized in social media and the news. Now, whilst the actual statistics indicate a 34% downward trend in social violence over the past year in the UK, and that's over the past decade, and it's still dropping. That's true in the UK, and it's still true in the US. And despite that, fear of violence, driven by the fear porn on the social media platforms, is rising, and people feel less safe. We have a thing called the negativity bias, where our brain looks for what's wrong, because it's what's wrong that might eat us. And the addictive scrolling and the modern news isn't designed to be honest. It's not designed to deliver accurate information. But like the rest of the digital domain, it also is an attention economy. So it's intended to hold and direct your attention, right, into the places that those who are running those things want it to be directed. We live in an attention economy, and attention is triggered by emotion. Attention is triggered by emotion. Hence, emotionally evocative headlines direct your life energy and attention. And life energy and attention is money. Attention harvested by politically driven individuals and groups is food for political power. Political power and dominance is control and money. Now, social media and digital devices were designed to activate your mesolimbic dopamine networks. That's the bits of the brain that run from the base up to the emotional part of the brain, and they were designed to keep your attention logged into the device because attention is money. We live in an attention economy, and understanding your own neurobiology and how it works frees you from that. Now, attention is harvested. It's harvested through emotional reactivity. Clicks, likes, follows, and it's harvested by the polarization of the media, where there's this and there's that, and the increasing polarization. And when that happens, down the rabbit hole we all go, the rabbit hole of neurobiological complexity. Now, there are other issues that drive us into stress. The cost of living. Now, interestingly, everywhere except China, the cost of living is rising, and rising fast. Everything from food to energy to water, all the basics and the luxuries are rising in price as income remains the same. This means that basically you are getting poorer. Relatively, you are poorer as every year goes by, unless you're a billionaire. You're poorer every single day because of those increasing costs, like I said, except in China. Now, 8 billionaires and 1 trillionaire own half the planet's resources. 8 billionaires. Now, the polarization of wealth and ownership increases with the super rich getting richer and the rest of us getting poorer. That's not necessarily a problem unless it's a problem. None of these things are problems unless they're a problem. It's not necessarily bad. But then again, there's war, and there is climate anxiety. And the reality, the reality behind the science is the climate is changing, and that change is detrimental for humanity. On top of that, there's debt. The US government's debt is growing the fastest in the world, from 120% of GDP and heading towards 143% with speed. Now, many European countries such as France and Italy and Greece are over 130%, their national debt of GDP, all right? Now, France is over 113%. Now, the UK, interestingly, is much smaller, but still high at around only 96% of GDP. So Germany's doing well with only 60 to 65%. Germany's probably doing the best. Now, in the US, the total household debt of households owes around $13.4 trillion. Now, most of that is in mortgages, and some of it's, it's followed by credit cards and loans. But that amount is rising. Again, it's rising. People are going into debt to survive. UK is following, of course. It's following suit with the US, with the average household coming above £66,000 in debt, total debt, and between 1,000 to 2,000 per adult on credit cards. That's how we're living. That is not necessarily going to get easier. Now, where's the link here? The link between breath and mind as cognition, that's how we think, and emotion in us humans is strong. Now, what are the symptoms that you're being played? How do you know you're being played by the attention economy? Well, phone addiction is number one. Number one, you can't put your phone down, you keep picking it up every minute. The second one is emotional reactivity and irritability. Another one is getting anxious about the future from all the fear porn. Another one is anxious, seeing new people, different people. Another one is the need to be in control. All of those are symptoms of being played by the attention economy. How do you reclaim your attention? How do you reclaim your life energy? Well, I'm going to give you 5 primary breath-based strategies. First of all, number 1 is a return to functional breathing. And again, if you look at my other videos, you look at my online courses, if you look at the book that I've written called The Evolving Breath, all of that information is in there. Number 1 is a return to functional breathing. Now, you can find all about this on my online courses on my website, and you can also read about it in the book that's just released called The Evolving Breath. The second is down regulation, being able to regulate your state and relax your nervous system, and come into a place whereby you are no longer stressed out. The third one is using breath-based practices to build resilience. And this is mostly through hormesis and playing with blood gases and the movement of attention in the body. The fourth is intelligent breath holding. And that's a really useful practice. And the fifth is addressing the dynamic interplay of neural architecture. How do we navigate our neural architecture at will? And once again, all those teachings, if you like, all those practices are available in my online courses like Stress to Resilience. We also know from the evidence base that 4 kinds of mind training work well. They work really well. And again, these are from the global wisdom traditions. Number 1 is focused attention. Number 2 is open monitoring. And number 3 is moving between these two. Number 4 is perceptual orientation. So what does that mean? Well, again, you look at my online courses, you'll get all those practices, and you can start to reclaim your own neurology. How do you reclaim your kind-mindedness, your capacity to make humankind and objectify people? How do you reclaim your innate human compassion? Because you can. And the answer is compassion and loving kindness meditation. It works. Now, those two, like I said, are also rooted in appropriate self-care. How do you look after yourself physically, emotionally, intellectually? How do you reclaim your financial intelligence? Remember, we live in an attention economy where attention is money. Well, you catch the body-based stress dynamics, the changes that occur in your body when you squirt adrenaline through it, and you learn how to change them. And that level of awareness is what we call embodied awareness, the capacity to feel and see and notice changes and movement in the body in terms of interoception and sensation. Specific movement practices can be used to reduce or eliminate the body-based tensional patterns that build up in the body with stress, in the upper trapezius, around the diaphragm, around the belly. And these patterns are learned through childhood and then amplified to the maximum by the modern neural landscape of fear and stress. Of course, another way of doing it is recreating community and sharing, the thing that evolved us human beings in the first place. That's what we grew out of. Another one is authentic relating, rooted in the arts of good communication, positive communication. Rooted in concern, rooted in curiosity, in fact. And of course, then there's resonance, how we work together electromagnetically, biologically, as individuals in groups. Now, all of this is the 13-step program to neural liberation, the 13-step program to neural liberation and freedom from manipulation by bad actors and the attention economy. And remember, we live in the attention economy. And if you don't take control of your own neurobiology, you will be played. That's how it rolls. That's the age we're living in. And if you can use these practices to reclaim control of your own neurobiology, you can live and operate in a place of relative freedom, which is the freedom not to be manipulated, the freedom to make active choice, and the freedom to expand your influence and your capacity to be in the world in a really good way.